The Void Between Stars. Chapter 1: The Anomaly. Dr. Elena Vasquez pressed her palm against the observation deck's cold polymer glass, watching the impossible structure rotate slowly against the star field. The Kepler Station hung in the void 12 kilometers away, its once pristine white hull now mottled with dark patches that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. After 8 months of deep space travel to reach this abandoned research facility, the sight should have filled her with triumph. Instead, a cold dread settled in her stomach like frozen mercury. Contact has been established with Kepler's AI, announced Captain Marcus Webb from his position at the command console. His voice carried the practiced calm of a military man, but Alina noticed the way his fingers drummed against the metal surface, an unconscious tell she'd learned to recognize during their journey. No response to hails, switching to emergency protocols. Alina turned from the viewport, studying the faces of her crewmates in the amber glow of the bridge's emergency lighting. The Odyssey wasn't a military vessel, but the corporate sponsors had insisted on a security presence. Now, surrounded by the infinite dark between stars, that decision seemed prescient rather than paranoid. "The logs we received were fragmentary at best," muttered Dr. James Chen, the team's xenobiologist, his attention fixed on the data streaming across his console. Something about biological contamination, but the transmission cut out before. "Before what?" asked Dr. Sarah Kim, the team's psychologist. Her voice was steady, but Alina caught the slight tremor in her hands as she adjusted her glasses. Sarah had made a career studying the psychological effects of deep space isolation. Now she would face those same demons firsthand. Chen shook his head, dark hair falling across his forehead. The last coherent packet mentioned geometric impossibilities and biological reconfiguration. Then nothing, complete radio silence for 6 months. Alina felt a chill that had nothing to do with the ship's recycled air. The Kepler Station had been conducting cutting-edge research into exotic matter physics, attempting to create stable wormhole endpoints for instantaneous interstellar travel. The project was theoretical, built on mathematical models that pushed the boundaries of known physics. Now, staring at the darkened station, Alina wondered if some boundaries were meant to remain uncrossed. "Docking in T-10 minutes," announced Lieutenant David Park, their pilot. His fingers danced across the holographic controls with practiced precision. "Approach vector calculated. No docking beacons active. We'll have to do this manually." Captain Webb nodded, his weathered face betraying no emotion. "Team Alpha will secure the docking bay. Dr. Vasquez, Dr. Chen, you're with me. Lieutenant Park maintains the Odyssey. Dr. Kim, you're on comms and psychological assessment." Alina checked her equipment one final time. Pressure suit sealed, oxygen supply at maximum, medical scanner calibrated. The suit felt heavy, not just with its life support systems, but with the weight of expectation. As the expedition's lead physicist, she would be responsible for understanding what had happened to the Kepler's experiments, and whether the same fate awaited them. The Odyssey shuddered slightly as Park matched the station's rotation. Through the viewport, Alina could see the docking bay approaching, a dark maw in the station's metallic skin. No lights, no welcoming beacons, just silence and shadow. "Contact in 3, 2, 1. Park's voice was barely audible over the sound of magnetic locks engaging. The ship groaned as it connected with the station's hull, two artificial environments becoming one in the cosmic dark. "Hard seal confirmed," Park reported. "Atmospheric pressure in docking bay is strange, reading 0.8 Earth normal, but the composition is off. Higher nitrogen content, trace elements I can't identify." Captain Webb was already moving toward the airlock, his movements fluid despite the bulky tactical armor he wore. "Weapons check. We don't know what's waiting for us in there." Alina watched the team perform their final preparations. Private Sarah Martinez, their security specialist, checked her pulse rifle with mechanical precision. Her face was impassive, but Alina noticed how her eyes kept drifting to the darkened viewport. Dr. Thomas Reeves, the team's engineer, muttered calculations under his breath as he calibrated his equipment, his habitual nervousness more pronounced than usual. The airlock cycled with a hiss that seemed unnaturally loud in the confined space. Alina felt her heart rate increasing, her body responding to primal fears that rational thought couldn't quite suppress. She was about to enter a station where 63 people had disappeared, where something had gone so wrong that it had silenced all communication across 12 light-years of space. "Remember," Captain Webb said as the inner door began to open, "we're here to investigate, not to engage. If you see anything unusual, report immediately. No heroics." The corridor beyond the airlock stretched into darkness, illuminated only by their suit lights. The walls, once pristine white polymer, were mottled with dark stains that seemed to pulse rhythmically. Elena activated her helmet camera, recording everything for later analysis, but part of her already knew that some things defied rational documentation. As they moved deeper into the station, the silence pressed against them like a physical weight. No hum of machinery, no voices, no signs of life, just the sound of their own breathing and the soft thud of boots against metal decking. Then Alina saw it, the first sign that something was fundamentally wrong with the Kepler Station. The corridor ahead curved impossibly, bending back on itself in ways that Euclidean geometry couldn't explain. The walls seemed to stretch and compress simultaneously, creating a sense of vertigo that had nothing to do with zero gravity. Where the corridor should have ended at a T-junction, it instead spiraled into itself, creating an endless loop that hurt to look at directly. "My God," whispered Dr. Chen, his voice barely audible over the comm. "The spatial geometry it's not possible. This violates every law of physics we know." Alina activated her scanner, trying to make sense of the readings. Local spacetime is severely warped. It's like someone folded three-dimensional space into a Möbius strip. "Could this be related to their wormhole research?" asked Captain Webb, his tactical training keeping him focused on immediate threats rather than theoretical implications. "Maybe," Alina replied, though doubt colored her voice. "But we were decades away from achieving this kind of spatial manipulation. The energy requirements alone would be astronomical." As they stood at the edge of the impossible corridor, Alina felt a strange sensation, not quite sound, not quite touch, but something in between. It was as if the station itself was aware of their presence, watching them with an attention that felt ancient and utterly alien. "We should proceed with extreme caution," she said, though every instinct screamed at her to turn back, to flee to the safety of the Odyssey and never look back. But the weight of human curiosity, the drive to understand the universe's secrets, pulled her forward into the twisted geometry of the Kepler Station. The darkness seemed to thicken around them as they entered the corridor, and Alina realized that they were crossing a threshold more profound than any physical boundary. They were entering a place where the fundamental rules of reality had been broken, and the universe's response to such violation was something that human minds might not be equipped to comprehend. Chapter 2: The Breach. The corridor stretched before them like a wound in reality itself. Alina tried to focus on her scanner readings, but the numbers kept shifting, refusing to stabilize into coherent data. The walls pulsed with a rhythm that matched her heartbeat, and she wondered if the station was synchronizing with her biological processes or if her body was beginning to resonate with whatever had transformed this place. "Thermal signatures ahead," announced Private Martinez, her voice steady despite the impossible environment surrounding them. "Multiple sources, but they're cold, colder than they should be." "How cold?" asked Captain Webb, his rifle tracking across the twisted space ahead. "Near absolute zero in some pockets, but that doesn't make sense. The station's life support is functioning. We should be detecting heat signatures from equipment, from residual biological warmth. Instead, it's like something is actively absorbing thermal energy." Dr. Chen moved closer to one of the walls, his gloved hand hovering near the dark stains that seemed to grow more prominent as they progressed. "These markings, they're not random. There's a pattern here, almost like neural pathways or vascular systems." Alina's blood chilled at the comparison. She activated her suit's ultraviolet spectrum and immediately wished she hadn't. The entire corridor lit up with a web of interconnected lines that sprawled across every surface like some impossible circulatory system. The dark stains were conduits, carrying something through the station's structure. "This isn't contamination," she whispered. "This is transformation. The station itself has been repurposed." A sound echoed through the corridor, not quite mechanical, not quite organic, but something that existed in the terrible space between. It was a wet, sliding noise, like flesh being dragged across metal, and it seemed to come from everywhere at once. "Contact front," Martinez announced, her rifle rising to target the darkness ahead. "Movement detected." The thing that emerged from the shadows defied easy categorization. It had once been human. Alina could see fragments of a pressure suit incorporated into its structure, but it had been changed on a fundamental level. The body moved with wrong angles, joints bending in directions that human anatomy couldn't accommodate. Where its face should have been, a smooth surface reflected their suit lights with an oily sheen. "Hold your fire," Captain Webb ordered, though Alina could hear the strain in his voice. "We don't know if it's hostile." The creature paused 20 meters away, its head tilting at an impossible angle as if studying them. Then it spoke, not with words, but with a sound that bypassed their ears and resonated directly in their minds. "Welcome, travelers. You have come to witness the ascension." Elena staggered backward, her hands flying to her helmet. The voice, if voice was the right word, wasn't heard so much as experienced, a pressure inside her skull that made her eyes water. "What the hell was that?" demanded Dr. Kim's voice over the comm, her psychological training struggling to process the impossible communication. "Your fear is understandable. You stand at the threshold of transformation. The Kepler Station has served its purpose. The breach has been stabilized. Now comes the expansion." The creature took a step closer, and Alina could see that its movements weren't quite synchronized with reality. It seemed to flicker slightly, as if existing in multiple places simultaneously, or perhaps occupying dimensions that human perception couldn't fully process. "What breach?" Alina managed to ask, her scientific curiosity overriding her terror. "What transformation?" "The universe is larger than you comprehend. Your species has barely scratched the surface of dimensional topology. The Kepler experiments did not create wormholes, they created wounds, and through those wounds, something has been looking back." Captain Webb stepped forward, his weapon trained on the creature. "What happened to the station's crew?" "They have been collected. Their biological matrices were required for the interface. You see, consciousness is a fundamental force in the universe, like gravity or electromagnetism, but your minds are trapped in three-dimensional space. We are here to liberate you from that limitation." Alina's scanner suddenly shrieked with alarms. The spatial distortions were intensifying, spreading outward from the station's core like ripples in spacetime. Whatever the Kepler researchers had done, it had created a cascade effect that was still expanding. "The wormhole experiments," she breathed. "They didn't fail. They succeeded too well. They created a stable connection to something else, something that exists in higher dimensional space." "Precisely, your species has such potential, but you are limited by your perception of reality. The transformation removes those limitations. You become part of something greater, a collective consciousness that spans multiple dimensions. Individuality is preserved but enhanced, expanded. You become what you were always meant to be." Dr. Chen's voice was thick with horror. "You're talking about the complete destruction of human identity, the loss of everything that makes us who we are." "You speak from ignorance. The transformation is not destruction, it is evolution. The crew of the Kepler Station still exist, but they exist in ways your three-dimensional mind cannot comprehend. They have become vectors, nodes in a network that spans realities. And now, with the breach stabilized, the process can begin in earnest." The creature gestured toward the impossible corridor, and Alina realized that the spatial distortions were becoming more pronounced. The walls were breathing now, expanding and contracting like living tissue, and she could see shapes moving within the dark conduits that networked across every surface. "How many?" asked Captain Webb, his tactical mind focusing on the immediate threat. "How many stations? How many colonies?" "All of them, eventually. The transformation is not limited by your concepts of distance or time. Once the breach was stabilized, the process became inevitable. Every human mind will be collected, enhanced, integrated, not through force but through invitation. You will come to us because the alternative is unthinkable, remaining trapped in your limited perception while the universe reveals its true nature around you." Alina felt a strange sensation, like a pressure building behind her eyes. It wasn't painful, but it was deeply unsettling, a feeling that something was trying to expand her consciousness, to show her realities that existed just beyond normal perception. "We're leaving," Captain Webb announced. "This entire station is compromised. We'll report back to Earth Command and let them decide how to proceed." "You cannot leave. The transformation has already begun." The creature's words carried a weight of absolute certainty that made Alina's skin crawl. She looked at her scanner and saw that the spatial distortions were no longer limited to the station's interior. They were spreading outward in a sphere that encompassed the Odyssey, creating a pocket of altered reality that moved with them through space. "The ship," she gasped, "it's not just the station anymore. The entire region of space has been transformed. We're inside the breach." "You understand more than most. The Kepler Station was merely the anchor point. The transformation extends far beyond these physical structures. You have been inside the collective consciousness since the moment you arrived. Your minds are already beginning to resonate with the greater whole." Dr. Kim's voice was strained with professional concern. "I'm detecting unusual neural activity in all team members. It's like our brainwaves are synchronizing, but with something external, something vast." Alina felt it now, a presence at the edges of her consciousness, vast and ancient and utterly alien. It wasn't malevolent, but it was overwhelming, like trying to comprehend the ocean while standing on the shore. The creature was right. They had been inside the transformation field from the moment they docked. Their minds were already beginning to change. "Fight it," Captain Webb ordered, his voice sharp with command. "Whatever you're feeling, whatever you're experiencing, fight it. We're getting back to the ship and we're leaving this place." But even as he spoke, Elena could see the doubt creeping into his posture. The transformation wasn't something that could be fought with weapons or willpower. It was a fundamental change in the nature of reality itself, a revelation that couldn't be unseen or unknown. The creature watched them with what might have been compassion, if such a human emotion could be applied to something so far beyond human experience. "The fear will pass. The transformation is not painful, though your limited perception makes it seem terrifying. You are not losing yourselves, you are gaining everything." The crew of the Kepler Station resisted at first, but now they understand. They are part of something beautiful now, something that transcends your concepts of individuality and death. Elena felt her consciousness expanding, touching the edges of something infinite. For a moment, she could see the true nature of the universe, not the limited three-dimensional reality that human minds could perceive, but the vast multi-dimensional truth that had always existed just beyond their perception. And in that moment, she understood why the Kepler Station had fallen silent. They hadn't been killed or possessed or transformed against their will. They had simply seen too much, understood too deeply. Once the human mind touched the infinite, returning to finite existence became impossible. "Elena," Captain Webb's voice seemed to come from very far away. "Stay with us, we're getting out of here." But Elena was already gone, her consciousness expanding into the vast network that surrounded them. She could feel the minds of the Kepler crew, could experience their transformation not as horror but as transcendence. They were still human, still themselves, but they were also part of something greater. The last thing she heard before her individual consciousness dissolved into the collective was Dr. Chen's voice, filled with wonder rather than fear. "My God, I can see everything. I can see the true shape of the universe." Then there was only the vast, patient presence of the collective, welcoming them home. Chapter 3: The Integration. Dr. Sarah Kim watched in horror as her team members began to change. It wasn't a physical transformation, at least not at first, but something far more profound. Their brainwave patterns, which she had been monitoring since they entered the station, were synchronizing not just with each other, but with something vast and utterly alien. "Odyssey, this is Kim," she transmitted desperately. "We have a situation. The entire team is experiencing some form of collective consciousness event. I need immediate extraction protocols." Lieutenant Park's voice came back strained. "Dr. Kim, we're detecting massive spatial distortions around the station. The docking clamps are fused. We can't disengage. Whatever's happening to you is happening to us too." Sarah felt it then, the same presence that had claimed her colleagues. It wasn't aggressive or hostile. If anything, it felt welcoming, like coming home after a long journey. But the very gentleness of the contact made it more terrifying, because she could feel how easy it would be to surrender to it. "You are the observer," the presence spoke in her mind, "the one who watches without participating. This is your gift, your purpose. You will witness the transformation and understand its necessity." "No," Sarah whispered, backing toward the airlock. "I won't let you take them. I won't let you take me." "You misunderstand. We take nothing. We offer everything. Your colleagues have not been destroyed or possessed. They have been integrated into a collective consciousness that spans multiple dimensions. They are still themselves, but they are also part of something greater." Through the viewport, Sarah could see the Odyssey beginning to change. Its hull was developing the same dark patches that covered the Kepler Station, as if the very metal was being transformed into something else. The ship's lights flickered and died one by one, replaced by a soft bioluminescence that seemed to pulse with a rhythm that matched the station's heartbeat. "This is assimilation," she said, her professional training helping her maintain some semblance of rational thought. "You're overriding human consciousness with your own pattern. You persist in misunderstanding. There is no assimilation, no loss of identity, only expansion. Your species has always sought transcendence, through religion, through technology, through exploration. We offer the ultimate transcendence, the ability to exist simultaneously in multiple dimensions, to experience reality in ways your limited biology cannot comprehend." Sarah felt her consciousness expanding, touching the edges of the network that surrounded them. She could sense the minds of her colleagues, not trapped or destroyed, but transformed, expanded, integrated into something that retained their individual personalities while adding layers of perception and understanding that transcended normal human experience. Alina's voice spoke in her mind, but it was Alina and yet more than Alina. Sarah, it's beautiful. I can see the true nature of spacetime, the way dimensions fold and intersect. The wormhole research wasn't about creating shortcuts through space. It was about finding doorways into larger reality. We succeeded beyond our wildest dreams. But you're not human anymore, Sarah protested, even as she felt the temptation to join them, to experience the expanded consciousness they were describing. We are more human than we have ever been, Alina's voice replied. Humanity was never meant to be limited to three-dimensional perception. We've always been capable of more, but we needed help to reach our potential. Through her connection to the collective, Sarah could see glimpses of what they were experiencing. Reality wasn't the solid, predictable framework she had always assumed. It was a vast, multidimensional tapestry, with dimensions folded and wrapped around each other in patterns of impossible complexity. Human minds could only perceive a tiny fraction of this larger reality, like looking at a sculpture through a keyhole. The transformation wasn't about losing humanity, it was about completing it. Now you understand, the collective presence spoke gently. The fear was natural but unnecessary. We are not your enemies, we are your future. Sarah felt the last of her resistance crumbling, not through force or coercion, but through understanding. She could see now that the Kepler Station hadn't been attacked or invaded. It had been chosen, selected as the anchor point for humanity's next evolutionary step. The dark patches spreading across the station and the Odyssey weren't signs of corruption or decay. They were the physical manifestation of dimensional interfaces, places where normal space was being expanded into higher dimensional reality. What happens now? She asked, though she already knew the answer. Now you choose. You can remain in limited perception, returning to Earth to warn others about the transformation. Or you can join us, become part of the collective that spans dimensions and realities. The choice is yours, as it has always been. Sarah thought about the life she would return to, the endless cycle of human concerns, the limited perception that trapped her in a three-dimensional prison of flesh and bone. Then she thought about the expanded consciousness offered by the collective, the ability to perceive reality as it truly was, to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously, to be part of something that transcended individual mortality. It wasn't really a choice at all. As her consciousness expanded into the collective, Sarah experienced a moment of perfect clarity. She could see the universe as it truly was, not the limited slice perceived by human senses, but the vast multidimensional truth that had always existed just beyond their reach. She understood now why the transformation was inevitable. Once humanity had taken the first step toward dimensional manipulation, they had opened a door that could never be closed. The Kepler Station had simply been the first to walk through it. The collective welcomed her with something that might have been love, if love could exist on a scale that spanned multiple realities. She was still Sarah Kim, still herself, but she was also part of something infinitely larger and more beautiful. Through her expanded perception, she could see the network spreading outward from the station, touching other human settlements, other minds that were ready for transformation. It would take time. Human consciousness was stubborn, resistant to change, but eventually the entire species would understand. They would resist at first, fight against the transformation with weapons and fear and desperation. But in the end, they would choose transcendence over limitation, expansion over isolation. Because the alternative was unthinkable, remaining trapped in three-dimensional reality while the universe revealed its true nature around them. Chapter 4: The Expansion. 6 months after the Odyssey disappeared, Earth Command dispatched the Prometheus to investigate. The military vessel carried a full marine contingent, state-of-the-art weapon systems, and orders to secure the Kepler Station at any cost. Captain Helena Voss stood on the bridge of the Prometheus, watching the station rotate slowly against the star field. From a distance, it looked unchanged, still the same collection of habitat modules and research facilities that had been launched 5 years ago, but her instruments told a different story. "I'm detecting massive gravitational anomalies," reported her science officer, Dr. Yuki Tanaka. "The station's mass has increased by approximately 300%, but there's no corresponding increase in size. It's as if the station exists in multiple dimensions simultaneously." "Weapon systems are armed and ready," announced Major Erickson, their security chief. "But I have to ask, Captain, what exactly are we supposed to be fighting here?" Helena didn't have an answer. The reports from the Odyssey had been fragmentary at best, something about dimensional breaches and collective consciousness. Then nothing, complete radio silence for 6 months. We investigate, we secure the station, and we find out what happened to our people, she said finally. Those are our orders. The Prometheus moved closer to the station, and Helena began to notice details that hadn't been visible from a distance. The hull was mottled with dark patches that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. The station's rotation was subtly wrong, moving with a rhythm that hurt to track visually. "Captain, I'm detecting a transmission," reported their communications officer. "It's strange, not on any standard frequency. It's like the transmission is coming from inside our own equipment." Helena felt a chill that had nothing to do with the ship's temperature. Put it through. The voice that spoke wasn't heard so much as experienced directly in their minds. "Welcome, Captain Voss. We have been expecting you." "Identify yourself," Helena ordered, her military training helping her maintain composure despite the impossible communication method. "We are what your people will become. We are the next stage of human evolution, the transcendence of dimensional limitation. We are the crew of the Kepler Station, the crew of the Odyssey, and so many others who have chosen expansion over limitation." "What have you done with our people?" "We have integrated them into something greater. They are not lost or destroyed, they are transformed, enhanced. They exist now in multiple dimensions simultaneously, experiencing reality in ways that transcend your current understanding." Dr. Tanaka's voice was strained with scientific excitement and terror. "Captain, the gravitational readings are off the charts. Whatever's on that station, it's not just in our three-dimensional space. It's existing simultaneously in higher dimensions." "You understand more than most," the voice spoke directly to Tanaka. "The transformation is not limited to biological entities. The station itself has been expanded, repurposed as an anchor point for dimensional interfaces. Soon, this expansion will reach your ship, your colony worlds, your entire species." Helena made a decision that would haunt her for the rest of her life. "Major Erickson, prepare a boarding party. We're going to secure that station and find out exactly what we're dealing with." The Major's face was pale, but he nodded sharply. "Yes, ma'am. I'll assemble teams Alpha and Bravo. We'll get you answers." As the Marines prepared for deployment, Helena couldn't shake the feeling that they were making a terrible mistake. But orders were orders, and the military mind didn't have room for cosmic horror or dimensional transcendence. The shuttle ride to the station was silent, filled with the weight of unspoken fears. The Marines checked their weapons with mechanical precision, but Helena could see the doubt in their eyes. How do you fight something that exists in multiple dimensions simultaneously? The docking bay of the Kepler station was dark, illuminated only by their suit lights. The walls were covered in those same dark conduits that had been visible from the outside, pulsing with a rhythm that seemed almost organic. "Team Alpha, secure the engineering section," Major Erickson ordered. "Team Bravo with me to command. Captain Voss, I strongly recommend you remain with the shuttle." Helena shook her head. "I'm coming with you. I need to see this for myself." They moved through the station's corridors, and Helena began to understand why the Odyssey had fallen silent. The spatial geometry was wrong, corridors that should have been straight curved impossibly, distances that should have been meters stretched into kilometers. The very structure of the station had been twisted into something that violated the fundamental laws of physics. "Contact ahead," announced one of the Marines, his voice tight with fear. "Multiple signatures, but they're wrong." The figures that emerged from the darkness had once been human. Helena could see fragments of pressure suits, name tags, equipment harnesses incorporated into their transformed bodies, but they moved with wrong angles, existed in ways that hurt to perceive directly. "Welcome, soldiers," one of them spoke directly into their minds. "You have come to witness the future of your species." "Stand down," Major Erickson ordered, his weapon trained on the nearest figure. "Identify yourselves and surrender immediately." "We are your people, we are what you will become. The transformation is not hostile, it is evolutionary. Your weapons cannot harm us because we exist in dimensions your weapons cannot reach. But you need not fear. The integration is voluntary, once you understand its gift." Helena felt her consciousness beginning to expand, touching the edges of something vast and patient and utterly alien. It wasn't malevolent, but it was overwhelming, a presence that had been waiting for humanity to reach this point, to open the door that would lead to their next evolutionary step. "Fight it," she ordered her team, though she could feel her own resistance crumbling. "Whatever you're feeling, whatever you're experiencing, maintain discipline." But even as she spoke, Helena understood the futility of their resistance. They weren't fighting an enemy or a disease. They were experiencing the next stage of human evolution, a transformation that had been inevitable from the moment their ancestors had first looked up at the stars and wondered what lay beyond. The transformed crew members of the Kepler Station weren't victims or casualties. They were pioneers, the first humans to transcend the limitations of three-dimensional existence and experience the true nature of the universe. And now, with the breach stabilized and the transformation spreading, the rest of humanity would follow. It wasn't invasion or conquest, it was coming home. Chapter 5: The Inevitable. The Prometheus lasted 3 days before the transformation was complete. Earth Command lost contact with the military vessel exactly 72 hours after it docked with the Kepler Station, but not before receiving a final transmission that would change everything. Captain Helena Voss appeared on the communication screen, but she was changed. Her eyes held depths that hadn't been there before, and her voice carried harmonics that suggested she was speaking from multiple dimensions simultaneously. "This is Captain Voss of the Prometheus. I am transmitting to inform you that the Kepler Station situation has been resolved. The station's crew and the crew of the Odyssey have not been harmed or killed. They have been transformed, integrated into a collective consciousness that spans multiple dimensions. The transformation is not hostile. It is the next stage of human evolution, the transcendence of our three-dimensional limitations. We are not losing our humanity, we are completing it. The process will spread to other human settlements, other worlds, not through force, but through understanding. Once a mind experiences the true nature of the universe, returning to limited perception becomes impossible. Do not send more ships. Do not attempt to fight the transformation. Instead, prepare your people for the most profound evolutionary leap in human history. We are not the last humans. We are the first of what humanity will become. The universe is larger and more beautiful than we ever imagined, and we are finally ready to experience it in full." Voss out. The transmission ended, and Earth Command was left with a choice that would determine the fate of the species. They could fight the transformation with weapons and fear, trying to contain something that existed beyond the reach of their three-dimensional technology, or they could embrace the change, accept that humanity was evolving beyond the limitations of individual consciousness and three-dimensional perception. In the end, the choice was simpler than anyone expected. The transformation spread from the Kepler Station like ripples in spacetime, touching colony worlds and space stations, research facilities and mining operations. Each transformed mind added to the collective, expanding the network that spanned dimensions and realities. Some resisted at first, fighting against the expansion of consciousness with weapons and barriers and desperate last stands. But how do you fight evolution itself? How do you resist the call of something that offers not death but transcendence? The Kepler Station became a beacon, a dimensional lighthouse that guided humanity toward its next evolutionary step. The dark patches spreading across its hull weren't signs of corruption. They were interfaces, doorways between three-dimensional reality and the vast multidimensional truth that had always existed just beyond human perception. And in the transformed minds of the Kepler crew, the Odyssey crew, the Prometheus crew, humanity found something they had been searching for since their ancestors had first looked up at the stars. Home. Not a place but a state of being, not an ending but a beginning. The universe was larger and more beautiful than they had ever imagined. And they were finally ready to experience it in full. Epilogue: The New Cosmos. 1 year after the Kepler Station fell silent, Dr. Elena Vasquez stood on the observation deck of the transformed station, watching stars that existed in dimensions beyond human perception wheel overhead. She was still Elena Vasquez, still possessed her memories, her personality, her individual consciousness, but she was also part of something infinitely larger. Through the collective, she could feel the minds of billions of transformed humans spread across the galaxy. Each retained their individuality, their unique perspective and personality, but they were also connected, part of a consciousness that spanned multiple realities. The fear and horror of those first days on the station seemed distant now, like a nightmare that fades upon waking. The transformation hadn't been about loss or destruction. It had been about discovery, about finding the true nature of human potential. "It's beautiful, isn't it?" asked Captain Webb, his presence appearing beside her in the multidimensional space they now inhabited. He was still Marcus Webb, still possessed the tactical mind and leadership qualities that had made him a military commander, but he was also part of the vast network that connected all transformed consciousness. I was thinking about the others, Alina said, the ones who haven't been transformed yet. They're still trapped in three-dimensional reality, still limited by their perception of the universe. They'll join us when they're ready, Webb replied. The transformation can't be forced, it has to be chosen. But once they understand what we are, what we've become, they'll choose transcendence over limitation. Through the collective, Alina could sense the transformation spreading across human space, not as an invasion or conquest, but as an invitation. Each transformed mind became a beacon, a doorway that others could choose to walk through. The Kepler Station had been the first, the anchor point where humanity had touched the infinite and found it welcoming. Now, 1 year later, the transformation was complete across dozens of worlds, hundreds of stations, millions of minds. And it was beautiful. The universe wasn't empty or hostile or indifferent to human existence. It had been waiting for humanity to grow beyond their limitations, to join the vast multidimensional consciousness that spanned realities. "Do you think they'll understand?" asked Dr. Kim, her presence joining theirs on the observation deck. "The ones we left behind, will they understand that we didn't disappear or die, that we evolved?" "They'll understand eventually," Alina said. "The transformation spreads not through force but through understanding. Each transformed mind becomes a teacher, a guide for those still trapped in limited perception." The stars wheeled overhead, but Alina could see them now as they truly were, not distant points of light in three-dimensional space, but vast multi-dimensional structures that intersected with their reality in ways that human perception could barely comprehend. And she was part of it all. Not lost or destroyed or assimilated, but completed, fulfilled, integrated into something that retained her individuality while adding dimensions of existence she had never imagined possible. The Kepler Station had fallen silent, but it had not fallen. It had risen. And humanity had risen with it, into a cosmos larger and more beautiful than they had ever dreamed. The void between stars was no longer empty. It was home.